Share the article that your group read and kind of how y'all dissected the issue at hand and what you recommend. All right, thank y'all for volunteering first. Make sure y'all can speak loud enough where everybody in class can hear you.
The title and article is New Zealand Suspends Live Cattle Exports After Ship Capsized Off Japan. And so there was a ship that had about 43 different crew members and I do believe it said several dozen different cattle that were being shipped for slaughter. And it left New Zealand and it was heading for China in mid-August. And one of the engines went out and the captain sent a distress signal for backup and help on that. And then a wave overtook the deck, and so people started, like they told everyone to put on their life jackets. I do believe only 2 people were alive, only mentions 2 survivors. And all of the cattle were just seen, there's a bunch of cattle that were seen floating in the ocean. And so
there's 43 people.
Yeah, there's 43 people that were on the ship. And so there is a person from SAFE, which is an animal welfare group in New Zealand, was saying that the trade between transporting livestock for slaughter should be banned. Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea of our article. And so the first question about animal welfare, we said that, well, they were saying that they just don't think it's right to transport animals on a ship at all or export them when they're alive. And then we kind of thought that most of the article was regarding animal welfare, not animal rights. So number 2 was just nothing. And then we agreed that they need to take more proactive measures to make sure the ships aren't going to sink basically before they leave, and they just need to be safer. But we disagree with completely taking away exporting animals, because this seemed kind of like a freak accident. And then number 5, it's complex because it's not something that happens all the time. Ships don't sink every day. And 6, like we said earlier, we think that they should move forward just by having better safety measures and having better backup plans and making sure that animals are all if they are alive, just making sure they have feed and water and they're not really cold or really hot.
In this particular ship, it was kept in the port, I think a day longer than it needed to be because they were having issues with it before they sent it out.
Lots of questions from class. Agreements, disagreements. Kind of their synopsis. What's something maybe they haven't thought about? Just a question that rose in my mind when I read this article was, why do we ship live animals if we know they're going to be used for meat consumption? Why do we ship live animals instead of shipping the end product? Why? I don't know. Did it mention anything in there about why they weren't harvested in New Zealand?
They said that the cows were something said they were most likely pregnant. They had babies, right?
They were being exported for breeding, not slaughtering. So it went along with the regulations still, if they did that.
But they knew kind of the end result would be slaughter.
Yeah.
So they kind of found a little loophole. Ooh. Does that make y'all think any different about anything they said?
It makes more sense why they were trying to transport them.
I thought it was an interesting article because, again, chapter 3 talks a lot about how animal welfare issues kind of first arose out of talking about livestock transportation, right? And how animals were treated in transit. Any suggestions y'all would make for moving forward? Like, what can we do? Like, do we need to be concerned about how animals are shipped overseas, or do we just kind of say it is a freak of nature and stuff happens? What do y'all think?
I think companies like that they're gonna make their boats the best way they can so they don't sink. So I think it was just a freak accident, really. So it really shouldn't be that concerned.
My thought is like, how are these animals gonna survive on a ship being exported over there?
I think we can definitely say probably accommodations are a lot better now than they were when probably the first Spanish cattle were brought over. Could y'all imagine that in the 1400s? I would like to think we probably made some improvements, right? But there's probably always room for improvement there. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in New Zealand. I think it's something we need to follow. Even though New Zealand's a small country, they're starting to show a lot of leadership in different areas that other countries are starting to look at some of the things that they implement. So, and New Zealand's also one of the largest cattle countries, right? So if they start requiring different things, especially with exportation of beef, it's going to impact us in the country. So it's important for us to pay attention to kind of what's going on there. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Since we've been talking about cattle, y'all can take us on a little different spin.
Our article was about bullfighting and how the coronavirus has already affected it, and animal activists are trying to pile on top of that to try to get rid of bullfighting for good.
The article showed both points of view from the animal rights activists and why it should be ended, but it also had interviews and quotes from people that are in the bullfighting industry and how it affected it. So question 1, what is mentioned related to animal welfare? Well, it wasn't really about animal welfare at all. It's strictly animal rights. They're completely wanting to do away with it because with bullfighting, they kill the bull at the end. Sometimes they're pardoned, but it's the right of the animal, for not even to have bullfighting anymore.
And what do you agree with about the issue? We both agreed yeah, it's pretty wrong to just cut up a bull when it's just for fun. Even though it has to do a lot with their culture, and it's basically the biggest thing their culture has, and how many years and history they have into it, makes it super complex about how can you actually get rid of something like this that provides so many jobs in the country and has been a part of it for so long.
You just summed up all his questions. I was like, what do we disagree with? Dr. Klein mentioned it's not necessarily what we disagree with, but it was one of the arguments it is their culture and their livelihood, and how are they going to survive and continue on without having that part of the industry? So that was one of the issues.
And how should they move forward? We really don't know how they should move forward because it's such an impact in their country. It creates so much revenue and so many jobs. And
how could you just completely do away with?
You'd have to find something completely new to replace it with that they could transfer everyone to that, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so one thing I talked with them about was sometimes it's hard to relate to these cultural issues that involve animals when it's not our culture. So what would be something that y'all would think is pretty similar to this idea of bullfighting, of using animals for entertainment?
Rodeo.
Yeah. What would that be like if this story were about ending rodeo? Which, are there proponents that this occurs pretty often? Yes. But what would y'all say? How are the two related? And what things should be considered?
I don't know anything about bullfighting, but the little bit that I do know about rodeos, that they like to take care of their animals just to make sure that they're in good health and they're able to continue doing what they're doing.
That, and I think of like our bullfighting compared to their bullfighting, like really people. You know, like we use them multiple times after. Because like even though we have bull riding, we also have bullfighting. And those bulls are treated normally better than the rodeo horses themselves. And so if anything, they could just do without like the whole killing aspect of the bullfighting over there. Because for the longest time, I didn't know that they killed them until like I was on YouTube one day and like watched it, and I was like, oh God,
Yeah.
this is not what I thought. Like,
It's
they
not
don't-
just a fun game that you
yeah,
run
like
through
I
the
just
streets.
thought they were out there doing that for like, and I was like, okay, this is so cool, and then no.
It's like Gladiator, but we just replaced the Gladiator with the bull.
Yeah.
Right? Till death.
Okay, so I have another thing. There's this thing called steer robbing, and it's like your team roping, except you have a big like broomstick with a tennis ball at the end of it, and you dip it in paint. And so then you don't rope the steer, you daub it with a tennis ball of paint, and it just leaves a spot of paint on them.
Uh-huh.
What if they did that instead of like stabbing it? They just like
You're like, I got here first. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting suggestion. Because how do you think steer daubing came about? People kind of wanting.
It's actually for people that don't know how to rope. So it's just a fun way to do a timed event with
Yeah.
people who can't rope.
But also, too, you don't want people roping that don't know what they're doing, because then the animal is more likely to get hurt, right?
Well,
Or
they're
dude falls off his
probably gonna
horse.
lose a finger.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some kind of like welfare, whether it's animal or human, kind of involved in creating an event like that to kind of keep people out of something that they don't know what they're doing, right? We talked about greyhound racing too. So like one of the big issues with greyhound racing is you have breeders that raise these dogs for racing, and then once they're done, they're often either completely abandoned, put in shelters, or euthanized, right? So that would almost be closest to what happens with bullfighting. And so what's happening with that right now? Any of y'all read anything lately? Susie, tell them your story about that.
Oh, well, back when I spent a summer back in Arizona, they ended up banning greyhound racing, and all of a sudden these shelters got overwhelmed with literally thousands of greyhound dogs because they were no longer allowed to race, and the breeders that bred them were like, well, you know, we can't sell all these animals and we can't legally have them because they're race animals now. So literally they had to have entire events of trying to get these dogs, you know, taken, and they were like, if the public does not come and take these animals, we will have to put them down. And it was just like a statewide thing, like, please take these animals, because like there is nothing else to do with them. But yeah, they're starting to shut them down and like ban it because like, I don't know, the conditions I suppose are just not what they should be, especially with breeding standards as well. Well, I mean, y'all probably more involved with animal breeding, but you understand some breeders are willfully not compliant with regulations just to win and to do things, so that was also a big issue of that.
And so, you know, greyhound racing is definitely an example that they talk about in the book, where sometimes animal rights or welfare organizations focus so much, they're not actually addressing maybe the issue at hand. And so, you know, they focus so much on outlawing or regulating, thinking that's the answer, but the issue was how the animals were being taken care of and the conditions. And by regulating or outlawing having greyhound races, you essentially, like in Florida, it put over 2,000 dogs up for adoption that needed to happen immediately. Like, same thing in Arizona. And that was just something that wasn't thought about until all of a sudden the regulation goes into effect, and we've got all these dogs now that we have to do something with. So, it's interesting. I don't know. Any other thoughts on bullfighting? Spanish bulls? Talking about rodeo bulls, a ranch in my hometown, they bred bulls for rodeos, but then they also took back in retired bulls so that they had a place to live, good quality of life.
It's just like, one of the girls that I know in rodeo, like, she now does like the circuit. Those are some of the nicest like pets.
And they literally text, yeah.
Well, you can pet them like through the fence and everything.
Yeah.
Be in there with them.
Feed
When you're
them,
feeding them
yeah,
in the
get in
bones.
there, play
Yeah.
with them.
Interesting. Who wants to go next?
We can go next.
Okay. Who wants the mic?
I don't know. I'm pretty loud already. Okay, so our article is about, well, it's titled, After Death Warrant for Bear, Animal Rights Group Demand Fair Trial. So there's bear in 2017 in Italy that attacked a dad and a son, and the animal rights people the activists say that it deserves a day in court. A bear. And a bear deserves a day in court, and they want to find the correct bear through like actual forensic research, so they can euthanize it because it attacked some people. They're both alive. The worst was that the dad was on crutches, but anyways, the place that they got attacked was a place where it's like a small area in the mountains where 80 to 90 bears already live. So it's a highly populated area for bears, and yeah. So
It was a nature walk, not just they
Yeah.
were kind of in the vicinity of it. It's like you literally go there to walk out where the
Yeah.
bears live. And then it just jumped out. They say it jumped out and attacked them. So question 1, it doesn't really talk about welfare, just mostly animal rights. So animal activists are saying that this bear that's going to be on trial and potentially get euthanized, that it should have a fair trial. They're not really saying don't euthanize it at all. I mean, they kind of mentioned it, but that wasn't the main point.
yeah.
So it was mostly about animal rights. And then what do you agree with about the issue? All the rest of the questions, pretty much, we just talked about them. We didn't come up with any clear-cut answers
Yeah.
because it shows both sides. You can kind of see both sides,
Yeah.
but it's altogether really complex.
Yeah, we agree that they should find the bear that attacked the people, but also they're wanting to do full research like they would on a serial killer for a bear that attacked 2 people in its natural habitat. And it's we disagree because who thinks oh, I'm going to go in a bear a place that's highly populated by bears and it's going to be 100% safe. I mean, if I knew there was 90 brown bears somewhere, I probably wouldn't even think twice about going there. But that's just me.
Where did this happen?
In Italy.
Are they going to what's the point of the trial?
They
Decide to kill it or not? Or euthanize it?
How does the bear have a voice? It's
Yeah.
not like you can talk. Are they
exactly.
hey,
So-
do this. It was brother over there.
Well, so the thing that they talk about is there was another bear that had attacked twice, a separate animal that had attacked twice, and they euthanized that bear. So basically, it's well, that bear was,
a serial
got-
attacker.
yeah, that bear got consequences for its actions, I guess, and so this one should too.
But there's another bear that they also mentioned that instead of killing it, they just put it in a fenced area and it lived the rest of its life. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. They have policies there that even if it's a mother bear protecting her cubs, they still euthanize them if they harm humans. So I don't really know why this
Yeah.
was so controversial and also why other bears didn't always get euthanized.
But what if they were, poking the bear, whatever?
Exactly, but
And,
the
throwing
thing-
rocks or
Yeah, were they
something?
even yelling while they were on this trail to keep bears away? Is there any-
the only thing it says that they did is that the dad says that the son was attacked first, out of nowhere. And so the dad started screaming and waving his hands.
But
Oh, wait, the opposite. The dad was attacked first.
how do you not hear a big giant bear?
You can hear freaking squirrels when you're doing that.
Exactly. I can hear my dog in the middle of the night, and that thing only weighs 70 pounds. This thing has to weigh 300 pounds.
So question number 5, the answer is everything. Everything is complex.
How many of y'all think because it's in its natural habitat, the bear should be allowed to stay alive.
That's a no-brainer. That's
How
just-
many of
if I
you
was
say
a-
no, it attacks someone regardless, euthanize it?
That just sounds like a lot of work, just to track down this one.
Oh yeah, that we didn't really talk.
That's my tax
Italy have attraction like that to begin with.
How bad is their bear population?
Well, I mean, they're in the mountains.
So they're in the bear's territory. The way
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
They only live in this like one area, but these hikers or whatever gotta think that. Like,
Yeah. Also, it says right here, if the bear in question is identified, the leader will inform the province, whose wildlife experts will try to narrow down the suspects, a bear, by sex and age. So, they're doing a lot of research to find out exactly what bear, but like, then they're putting themselves at risk by going to find which is the correct
By
bear.
a different bear.
Exactly, that's what we
They have to
said.
do it again.
It's not like a full hair, you know? Like,
Yeah.
What do we do with dogs who attack people?
shoot them. But I mean, it's true.
You're supposed to report them and they get
Yeah.
euthanized.
The sheriff comes, yeah.
Why is that different than the bear situation?
I mean, bears aren't really like domesticated.
They're
And we
wild.
were in
Those guys went out
they
there.
were in their, like.
Yeah, the hikers went out there at their own risk,
Yeah.
whatever, knowing that it was a populated area.
That's completely on
It's not harmful for like raising that dog, but not attack people. I feel like that might be the difference too. Like a bear, it's gonna, it's a bear. A dog should know the difference between biting a human and not.
So my sister has a Beagle Walker Hound mix. Her name's Jenny, like Forrest Gump. My sister will say they're like peas and carrots. You know, too much Forrest Gump. Anyway. Jenny is a brat. I usually use another B word. Describe her.
You say female dogs. let's say
Scientifically, she is.
She is, and I mean, I've known, her dog's as old as my dog. So we had our dogs together in college. Like, Jenny is just an obnoxious dog. She howls all the time. She's bratty, but she's never attempted to bite anybody until my son's first birthday. We had a birthday party for him. My sister brought her dogs. Jenny was eating a bone, and I guess at this time she would have been 9. So again, 9 years, hadn't attacked anybody. Will walked behind her, good 2 feet between them. And again, he turned 1, so he's kind of walking funny, but walked behind her. She turned around and tore him up. Bit a hole through his nose, bit a hole all the way through his lip, bit down, had holes in his shoulder, blood everywhere. Chad threw the dog against the wall. My uncle, thank goodness, he's a vet, he was there, so he could kind of help take care of everything going on with my son as far as like stitching him up, what all needed to be done. We do a lot of medical stuff with my uncle.
Mhm.
Any of y'all have vets in the family? All our x-rays, everything. So it was traumatizing. And I remember my uncle went to my sister and said, "I'm going to shoot your dog." And my sister said, "No, it's Jenny." And I was like, "Get out of here." You know, I was all for shooting the dog at the moment. But he said that animals, once they taste blood, are going to do it again. Like, once they get a taste for it, it's in their demeanor, it's in their behavior. And he's like, you don't ever need to have, if your dog doesn't die today, never needs to be around her son again. The likelihood of him being bit again by that dog increases. And I just looked at my sister and I was like, I told you to shoot you. Anyways. But now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that would have been the right, you know, it is
Yeah.
my sister's dog. It was the first time she bit somebody. So awful. It is a very complicated thing. It's kind of easy to talk about wild animals that aren't ours, but
Yeah.
when it is a domesticated animal, it's a little bit different situation. I don't know.
Well, like, I think of, like, people's dogs coming and, like, eating our chickens or, you know, something like that. Like, we don't have a problem shooting them because we know that they're going to come back and eat them again. So, like...
Well, and I just think it's kind of interesting that, like, on one hand, we want
wild animals to be treated and have the welfare that we give domesticated animals. But on the other hand, we're almost quicker to kill a domesticated animal
True.
than we are an animal in the wild in their habitat. It's an interesting paradox, I guess. Yeah.
Our neighbor has pit bulls, but we got about 200 head of cattle right there, and like every calving season, this pack of pit bulls will come because they just have puppies like every time. There's accidents, but they don't care. But they'll go and they'll chase these little calves, and they've killed, I think, like 5 last year.
Wow.
And 5 times whatever the market's doing, you're losing. And so we always have a gun in our little side-by-side, and I can never bring myself to it. Dad always takes the gun from me. But there was one time our neighbor's dog my bull was in there, and we had our bulls pulled off the cows, and it was like 3 Great Pyrenees in this mutt thing, and they were just running these bulls. I pulled this gun up, almost had him, but then I was like, nope, can't do it.
Yeah,
But
it just seems different.
Dad does it without like any heart at all. But I guess when they're chasing money, it makes a difference.
Yeah. That's so interesting. The bear one just cracks me up because of a fair trial. I don't know.
Oh, I read another article about the same story that said this is a plot line for the CSI cast.
Really?
Imagine this on TV.
That's so funny. Who wants to go next? Okay. All right. Y'all share with us your article.
So ours was USDA sued by animal welfare groups claiming mishandling of poultry slaughters.
This is like recent as of last week.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
September 3rd, 2020.
So pretty much there was like really bad mishandling, kicking and breaking of like legs and wings, and they just like threw them on the conveyor belt and they disappeared. Well, I mean, they became meat for us, but there was no repercussions to their actions. So yeah.
Yeah, for related to animal welfare, slaughter facilities had left large flocks of birds without food and water in plant holding areas for multiple days at a time.
And then for the animal rights, birds in slaughter plants were also subjected to intentional acts of cruelty by workers, including being kicked, hit, driven over or dumped onto conveyor belts with visibly broken legs and wings. And then for number 3, we definitely agree that there was some mishandling of these birds. We disagree, kind of. Like, it's hard to say we disagree. I don't know the correct word. But there has not been any repercussions for these actions. They just keep on happening. 2013 and 2016, there was also reported incidents of these, and there was really no like justice due to it.
Now there's 29 incidents at the Tyson plant in Decatur, and nothing. Like, it kind of just disappeared, and that's why this came up. They found out about it again.
What's complex about it? There's no true, like, when you think of like slaughtering animals, there's like for cows you have to go through a lot of like steps, and pigs and chickens there's not that really. But there's so many groups trying to fix it at once that's where we're having issues.
And so we said moving forward, they need to find better ways to kill, because there's over 9 billion chickens and turkeys slaughtered in the United States per year. And so they're trying to find different things. But there are like 6 or 7 groups who are constantly trying, but none of them are working together. They're trying to just each come up with different plans.
And I think like we were talking, so like cows, we kind of know the basics of like what goes into like getting a cow from like live to like in the package in front of our plate. But like with a chicken, we really don't know. Like whenever we were talking about it, like I just know that they go in a crate and then they go to a building and we don't know what happens. So I think they also need to educate more on that.
Any of y'all taken the Agle class where you have to, do y'all want to address any of that? Did y'all have to harvest chickens?
Yeah.
Sure, that's what y'all's experience was like.
You have to, like, we kill them ourselves, and you, like, hold their feet and pull their necks, and sometimes their heads fall off, but they die right away. And then you have to drain them, the blood out, and then you put them in water first, and then soak hot water so that their feathers can come off. Then they're dead. But then you put them in this thing that shakes them around until all the feathers come off, and then you process the meat. So you just cut the skin off and get all the meat out.
Was it the first time y'all had done that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Yeah. Why?
I don't ever want to pull a chicken's head off.
But see, like her and I were talking, like back home, like Dad just takes the head off, like, you know, and does it that way. So like, there's definitely different ways, and I think.
I don't really like chickens, but I still don't want to pull their heads off.
Yeah. The reason they have us do it like that is because it's called like cervical dislocation. That's supposed to be the most humane way to kill a chicken. But it does feel really gross. It's like the feeling of your back popping. But
It's supposed to like kill them the fastest.
yeah. And then, I mean, none of mine's heads popped off because I don't have enough upper body strength. So like the bigger guys,
The chickens lose
So
their head.
what's interesting with this issue is that at the same time that these animal welfare rights organizations are suing the USDA, there's also some poultry labor unions that are suing as well at the same time, that essentially what they're saying is that some of this misconduct is happening because companies like Tyson and such have increased the quota that they want killed per hour. And they feel like they're asking employees to do it at a rate so fast that it's causing inhumane treatment. And there's not really been an explanation provided to the employees as to why that decision was made. How does that add complexity to the issue? I mean, so now it's not just these undercover investigators going in and finding out, it's the employees themselves saying, I don't want to do this anymore.
I mean, why is the USDA being sued for what the companies are doing?
So,
Because there's not regulations.
poultry is so vertically integrated, and the USDA regulates everything
Okay.
down within that. And so, like, if the company said, okay, we can do it at this rate, it had to have been approved then by the USDA.
Oh, okay. I understand now.
Any other thoughts about their particular issue? What do y'all think should be done moving forward? Or, I don't know, it'd be interesting to follow, again, this is another one that's so recent, it'll be interesting to follow over the next year or two.
I mean, do they provide their employees with more efficient ways of processing to get more done in an hour? Or are they just expecting them to do the same job with the same skill set in less time?
Same job, same skill set, same equipment. Ramp up the conveyor belt.
Like that's all they do, they just put multiple chickens on the conveyor
That just
belt.
makes me think of that. I love Pussycat.
All right, how about y'all go next?
Since I caught your eye, Brent.
The issue that we had was, it's titled, Hawaii Animal Rights Activists Want Feds to Investigate Cockfighting. And what they found was that there were chicken breeders in Hawaii that were sending their fighting roosters over to Guam to fight, and they were just getting the money. Well, fighters in Guam were paying them for the chickens. And I have a hard time with this because I know Guam is United States territory, so you would think that it wouldn't make sense for them to send it to Guam then. but I also looked up that chicken fighting's only been illegal in Guam for like 2 years now.
And then I found some like article like there was a dude, don't remember what state it was. He had like over 700 roosters, and he got arrested for like cockfighting purposes. But he got arrested for having that many roosters. And then they were like Louisiana put like a ban in like 2007 for this act. It's illegal in all. It's illegal in all 50 states. It's also illegal in the District of Columbia. And what blows my mind, it's one of the world's oldest spectator sports. I was like, that just blows my mind.
Well, as far as the way this pertains to animal welfare and animal rights, I don't feel like I should have to sit here and explain to y'all why fighting chickens it doesn't seem quite right to me. Things I agree with, I agree. I feel like the feds should put a little more effort into investigating this, because like there are a million red flags that are coming up. Like for example, they're sending over their chickens labeled as meat birds and getting paid $3,000 for all this, and that's pretty ridiculous. They're sending, normally whenever you send over breeding chickens, that's what they have them labeled as. You would send over 90 hens and 2 roosters. Well, they're sending over 90 roosters and 2 hens. You know, stuff that's just, it doesn't take a lot to get probable cause to go look into it, I would think.
There is some corruption happening.
But so something I find that kind of makes this complex is I'm sure that it can be hard to base an investigation off purely this person's selling their chickens for too much. Like, and another thing I kind of thought about is like areas where cockfighting is real, where it's a real issue, have a lot of other issues such as drug cartels, sex trafficking, immigration, things that I think are causing a lot more issue to us that they probably just don't see the point in spending time, resources, and money into chickens, you know.
How do they fix it? Any suggestions?
Eat more chicken.
Absolutely. Any of y'all raise chickens? Try to sell roosters? It's hard, right? Like unless you're wanting to have and raise chicks and all that, you're on, you don't really need a whole lot of roosters, but you take them to market, there's not really a good price for them. Why do you think why does cockfighting happen? Kylie said it's one of the oldest spectator sports. Why?
It's pretty entertaining.
People make bets and they can make money.
Gambling.
I worked with a contractor. I worked for a contractor, and some of the guys that came on the job with me, they actually do chicken fighting.
I was going to say it's still around. Like I know people that still do it here in the United States. So.
At the junior college I went to, it was like right on the outskirts of town, and literally a mile down the road, there was a guy that lived on that corner down there, and out in his backyard he had probably 60 barrels all with fighting chickens just living there in them.
What's the animal welfare issue with fighting chickens?
It's fight to the death, and you're not treating them great because they're going to die.
And you're not using it. Not using it. It's purely for entertainment. Yeah.
And then there's the issue of removing their claws and attaching razor blades to them. That's
a whole other part of it. Yeah, it's pretty intense. And so, we have to get into this thing that, like, as a whole, and even the book says is that, raising animals for food and consumption, we can do it in a compassionate way, but that doesn't mean eating animals is wrong. But we can also say it, again, kind of having those both and arguments, we can say in the same vein that we also shouldn't use animals for pure entertainment, watch them die. So again, we kind of come back to the Spanish bullfighting, right? Like,
Some things just are not. I mean, if we value creation, we won't want to do that. Last but not least, share with us y'all's article.
So our title is Pet Microchipping Bill Heads to Governor, but the other animal welfare efforts come up short. So originally there was 12 bills, but it got knocked down to mainly just focusing on 3 due to COVID-19. It talked about microchipping for cats and dogs in shelters. There's a trophy hunt ban where like the taxidermists. It says that would have prohibited Californians from possessing taxidermy souvenirs of majestic African wildlife. And then there's an animal blood bank as well. So I guess that's kind of like the whole animal I can't talk it as animal welfare deal.
Also, another deal is it talks in here the CEO of the Social Compassion and Legislation, and this is the one where they're pushing all the bills in Sacramento. And they said with all the disastrous stuff happening in 2020, this should be the one good thing coming out of it.
But for the animal rights, the blood banks is where the dogs were kept in cages to harvest their blood for sale. And then due to like overpopulation or whatever in the shelters, they'd euthanize the animals that weren't adopted. We agreed with the microchipping deal because, I mean, it's like you're claiming your animal or reclaiming your animal if it's lost. You can take it to the local vet, whatever, and get it scanned so you have proof that it is your animal. But we kind of
disagreed about the fact that it states in here, one of the previous dudes, they tried to pass a similar bill, and he ended up saying no because it's not fair, you know, for them to have to pay for it. However, if you're going to own an animal, you should be able to properly take care of it.
Yeah.
If you want to get it microchipped, I mean, you should be able to.
But what I was thinking about, like, why is it so complex? If you think about all the animals that are in the shelter, like, imagine having to microchip all of them. I mean, they're already overflowing with animals and euthanize animals. So the cost, it all boils down to the cost of it, I think, with everything.
And it also touched on the greyhounds and their kennels and everything. With this picture, if you look down below, it mentioned that.
But how should we move forward? I guess possibly make the microchipping more affordable. If they're really wanting to pass the bill, then that's, like I said, it all boils down to money. Everything's about money. And if they really want to pass it, then they need to figure out something to make it affordable for the owners or the adopters.
Does anybody have an animal that's microchipped? What made y'all decide to microchip your animal?
Mine came with it because I adopted her, and at the shelter they always do that, I think, or some shelters, I guess.
See, and then also talked about where, like, if the owner can afford the microchipping, it talked about like how the states would have to pay for it too.
If it was mandated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Washington pays for microchipping.
No.
I don't know. No.
I just
She said no.
Not a little bit.
My dog got, like, so I was away and my dog was staying at my boyfriend's, and he literally, like, walked inside, and his dog and my dog, and not to sound like bratty or anything, but my dog's definitely prettier than his dog. She is. So they stopped and picked her up, and that, like, was, I mean, after the whole incident, but, like, you can take somebody, like, if you see your animal pop up, you can make them take that dog to the vet and be able to, like, make sure there isn't a microchip. And so that's where, like, she's definitely a breeding piece. So, like, if somebody takes her and I see that dog, or somebody sees it and is like, hey, I think this is your dog, that's one way that I automatically know, like,
she's microchipped.
You raised your hand too, Jensen, didn't you?
We did it because she liked to run out the door like we didn't feed her, and she was a big old dog, like a fat lab. So we didn't want someone to think the only option was to like shoot them because they don't know what to do with this big old dog. And so on her collar we had microchip like type or like put on it. That way when they like grab her collar, she also like to try to get that off. But
My dog's not microchipped, and I hadn't thought about it until there was a dog in our neighborhood this summer that roamed around for like 2 days. Looked like some type of pit mix. Sweet dog though, so sweet. Followed me home one night, and I talked Chad into us putting it in the backyard to see if like anybody claimed her. And then I was secretly like hoping the dog would stay with us. We ended up naming the dog Buster because it busted out 2 hours later. Like obviously it had an issue with breaking out of places. But then I realized I was like, well, somebody finally called animal control here in town. They came out, got the dog. 3 weeks, nobody claimed the dog at the shelter, like even came and inquired about her. And so then someone in our neighborhood went back and adopted her. And I was like, a microchip would have been nice because to me that is a little bit on that like animal cruelty side. It's like dropping a dog off and because you don't want it. It'd be nice to know who the owners are. Like, yeah, what would be your right? Like, should owners be responsible for dogs that they just drop off and leave? I don't know.
My friend has a corgi, and she used to leave her outside because she was like used to being in Kansas on their farm, like and could go anywhere she wanted. And then when she moved to Stillwater, she would like wander on the sidewalk, and animal control would literally pick that dog up like, every week, and she would just like automatically go to the shelter if she couldn't find her dog because I had to pick her up.
That was the thing that surprised us was that nobody claimed the dog. Like they obviously had dropped her off. And I don't know if they dropped her off in the neighborhood or the dog just ended up there. So sad. Well, I hope kind of reading these articles about animal issues, animal welfare issues, gives y'all some ideas as you're doing your own species report of like how to find these issues. You know, you can type in, if you were assigned dogs, you could type in dog animal welfare issues, and of course you're going to get website after website of organizations telling you what the issues are. But it's really important to look in the news. You know, go to Google, put that in your search bar, but instead of just searching all of the internet, hit news. See what the news articles are. Get reputable sources. You know, a lot of these articles came from the New York Times, right? Like reputable sources that we can trust to kind of talk about these issues. And I mean, a lot of them go back pretty far. So it should give you some good places to start doing some research on your species. We have one more article we want to hand out to you to take with you. Would like for y'all to read it. I know you're also reading chapter 5, hopefully finishing that in the worksheet up for Thursday. But this is just an interesting opinion piece from the New York Times. And I say that to preface it with that it is an opinion piece. That someone's just saying, you know, we can look back at things in the past and we can see certain actions that we don't agree with that we're like, how did people think it was morally okay to do that, right? And honestly, it starts off with this idea of like slavery and all this stuff, and we put up statues of people who had slaves, like, and you know, now we're having this discussion of whether they should remain or not. And he just said it made him start thinking about what are his great-grandchildren going to look back about our time and say, they thought it was okay to do that? And he says cruelty to animals is one that he thinks future generations are going to look back on us on. So I just think it'd be interesting for y'all to read that and to kind of start our discussion off there on Thursday. All right, see y'all then.